Greenlight Network presents Football Time.
Hey, and welcome to the Football Time Show. NFL Week 2 is in the books, and it was a crazy week. A highest of highs and the lowest of lows, both in the games and on the betting side of things. So, interesting week. With us, as always, is Achilles Rain. What did you make of Week 2, Achilles?
A lot of upsets, just kind of like week one, a lot of unexpected outcomes, but overall, I think a pretty entertaining week.
Yeah, definitely so, entertainment-wise. Let's get to the first of the crazy games. Let's get to Dolphins Ravens. I think we talked about on Friday about how we thought this might start to lean a little bit of a blowout towards the Ravens. We looked like geniuses for 3 quarters there. And then we did not look like geniuses because all of a sudden Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, and Tua started just drilling bombs nonetheless. But I think what I take away from this game is, I watched a lot of it. That first half, I was just, it was more of the same from like Tua. You see some good plays, you see some bad plays. But, really towards the end of that third quarter, into that fourth quarter, it finally looked like everything just sort of clicked for Tua. Now, we don't know if that will carry over game to game, but this was the guy you saw at Alabama, reading things right, hitting guys in stride on explosive plays, and, just bam, 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 everything perfect, precision. He looked good moving outside the pocket, avoiding the rush, which is something that, I think has been the most clear that had not come back to him since that hip surgery at the end of Alabama. And it just looked like everything sort of came together in this game. So what do you make of this game? We'll get to the Ravens, but what do you make of this Dolphins? What do you make of Tua here on this big-time comeback and the 42-38 win here?
Yeah, I mean, listen, a little surprising. I know this Dolphins team is pretty good, but I didn't expect this type of comeback, and I also didn't expect them to – it looked like they were getting completely manhandled, but I think this was definitely a coming-out party for Tua. You see why he was so highly touted coming out of college, and, it was about time that we saw a game like this because, as you mentioned, so far his career has kind of reminded me a little bit of kind of like Jimmy Garoppolo, where he does a lot of really good things and he can get your team somewhere, but is he going to be that guy that gets you over the hump? And I think that this performance showed that as long as his development continues to go the way it's going, he could definitely get you to the promised line. But it really good to see. I think if you're a Dolphins fan, pretty exciting stuff to see.
Yeah, that's actually a great comp because I was thinking about that today. Tua, probably before this last, quarter and a half, I think you'd put him in like the Jimmy G category or a couple other guys. His overall record, was 17-8. That's a good NFL record. So I don't like when I hear, oh, he can't win in this league, because he's been winning in this league, even when he hasn't played great. He just hasn't lived up to probably the expectations you had for him, coming out of the draft. But some of that he can't control. The, coaching situations, the offensive coordinator situations, the COVID situations into his rookie year, mixed with that hip injury that I think, you just go back 35 years, that ended Bo Jackson's career. It was the exact same injury. So, I think it took a little longer. So we'll see if he can sustain this. But you finally saw a game where he looked like he could be one of the quarterbacks who could carry, a team to a win. Now, that being said, wow, these Dolphins receivers on the outside, it's almost a little bit like the old school Rams, in the late 90s, early 2000s with like Holt and Bruce. But, even like Holt and Bruce, I don't think were this kind of explosive. They were really, really elite receivers. But these two guys, they can take a swing pass for 70 yards and they can just both blow the top off your defense. So What kind of receiver combination is this here? Can this, carry you throughout a playoff series and maybe get you to a Super Bowl? I know it's a little early to start looking like that, but we've seen 2 weeks now of this Dolphins team, and honestly, I think they're the most explosive team in the AFC, and probably if you're saying it in the AFC, there's nothing explosive going on the NFC side of things right now. But what do you make of these two as a receiver combination here?
I mean, they're just explosive. We already knew that, that Hill's going to be super fast regardless of who's throwing him the ball. He's got the speed to kill defenses, and you saw Waddle show that to us last year, and I think a lot of people were kind of wondering if it was going to work having two guys with that type of elite speed, opposite sides of each other. But you're seeing that the accolades that Hill's bringing, from KC is drawing attention towards his side of the field, which is leaving Waddle open for a lot of, longer mid-tier plays, and it's working. Now, it does take some time to refine, and it's not going to work all the time, but you see when it does, it can be pretty deadly because, honestly, it got to the point where I tuned off of that game because I thought there's no way they're coming back from this. This game's over. And then I started getting alerts on my phone about the score, and I had to go back and look at it because couldn't believe it, but it's just so much speed. And, you mentioned the greatest show on turf receivers, Holt and Bruce, and I agree. The deadliness is they're different receivers. Those guys, they were kind of bigger bodies and more possession guys with refined route running. But these guys are just as deadly. Their biggest weapon is their speed.
Yeah. You think about this, and the Dolphins haven't even really gotten that running game going. Now, I don't know if they will figure that out, but the offensive coordinator comes from a background where they have always been able to run the ball. So, if they can start to figure that out and mix that in, do you put this team, in? You probably don't quite put them up there with Kansas City or Buffalo yet, but would they be like right on that next, drop-off level tier 2, or do you want to see, a little bit more from them?
And this is the weird thing about this team is that, you look at this type of performance, you get excited about it, and you're like, yeah, but I want to see it on a consistent basis. And the reality of it is that it has been happening on a consistent basis. They've been winning for the last couple of seasons. I mean, these are basically playoff-bound Dolphins, but it just, for some reason, there's something there that just doesn't click. It just doesn't feel right. Maybe this is the year, now with two speedy wide receivers on opposite sides of each other, maybe this is what catapults them to the next level. But I definitely think that they've got what it takes, and I think they've really proved it over the last couple seasons.
All right, let's flip things over to the Ravens. It's sort of a hard to criticize them because, their offense looked really, really good. Lamar Jackson was ridiculous. Bateman and Duvernay have played really, really good at wide receiver, I've thought. You got to give them a little bit of a pass on the running game because, their legit running backs aren't quite back yet. But, this defense has been sort of trending downward a little bit the last, let's go 3 years. And, a lot of it has to do with injuries, but injuries started to mount up in this game too. And, I've talked about it the same thing with the 49ers. You can only come so many times with, injuries are killing our team. Well, health is part of this. You have to stay healthy in this. It's hard to criticize the Ravens because for 3 quarters they played a ridiculous game. But what are your thoughts on the Ravens here? Is just sort of they got hit with a barrage and we still look good at the Ravens, or are you seeing some more and more cracks in here?
Listen, the cracks are going to be there. There's issues with injuries. Their depth isn't quite there right now, so there's going to be issues. The cracks are pretty evident to anybody who's watching. But there's definitely a lot of good things to go after this game because, as you mentioned, they dominated pretty much for about the first 3 quarters of the game until that fourth quarter when Miami really made a big push. But they could do no wrong. Lamar Jackson was having a good game. His receivers were playing well. Tight ends were involved, and the defense was doing just enough to keep them ahead. It's just that fourth quarter, man. That's really what did it for them. And, it did them in, and unfortunately for them, they couldn't close it out. And I think that they take the positives from this game, but they also look at the big picture. You got to close games like these out. You can't assume that these teams are going to put themselves away.
Yeah, and the other thing I put in that not many other teams have the receiver combination and explosive ability to do this. So, I don't downgrade the Ravens too much, but I certainly got my eye and see if this sort of defensive of giving up big plays continues, on. And we'll see what happens when a couple of the Ravens running backs come back healthy and they're sort of able to sort of salt this game away. I think a couple of teams were unable to sort of put games away because either one, coaches chose not to run, or they just probably don't have totally the capabilities, to, sort of run and salt these games away. One who doesn't have a problem running and salt the games away was the Cleveland Browns. But I don't even know what to call this, because collapse would be insult to the word collapse here. The Jets won 31-30. It was a 2-touchdown game. Of course, the field goal kicker missed the extra point, which started the doom stretch of somehow blowing a 13-point lead in 1 minute and 33 seconds. I don't even know what to say to this game other than I think I was Nostradamus and sort of I think I started on it in about the second quarter that the Browns are going to find a way to blow this. What do you make of this Browns loss here? Because this one, it stings, because this was literally a victory, and it no longer is.
Yeah, like you said, it stings. It really hurts because this was supposed to be a win, at least on paper. And going into the game, they were definitely, really living that because they were dominating that game. And it seemed like I said earlier, they could do no. Nick Chubb was just going off, and I just assumed this game is going to go exactly as I thought, which is going to be they're going to just ground and pound it all game long and tire this Jets defense out. And it seemed like it was going that way. And all of a sudden, this score completely shifted. And kudos to the Jets. I'm sure that a lot of people were counting them out, and they came back and pulled it off. So you got to give them props. But, if you're Cleveland, you can't get too down. I think that you got to look at the bigger picture here. You have, certain players that aren't available to you right now, and it's pretty obvious that, you're lacking talent at that position. But once he gets back, if you can keep playing this way, I mean, the sky's the limit. They got a pretty good defense. They got a really good running attack. Now, they can get the quarterback position secured. I mean, I hate to say it, but this team could be a playoff team.
Yeah, a couple of things on the Browns that concern me. I ended up watching a lot of this game, sort of. Thanks, Sunday Ticket, for the nice hour and a half, error message. Thank God we get rid of DirecTV. But nonetheless, I watched the replay of this game because I just wanted to see if you watch Week 1's game versus the Carolina Panthers and that, defensive front and those safeties, they just seemed like there was high energy and they were flying around all over the place. And it just seemed like in this game, though they were dominating it for most of it, they didn't seem to have that sort of same high-level energy. They seemed a little bit lazier. They seemed like, oh, we got this game. We can control this game. And I don't think that's a new thing for this Browns team because we've been watching it for 3 or 4 years now where this Browns team has acquired enough talent to win football games, and they just seem to – it's a little bit like Minnesota. Now, we'll get to them. Some games you get that high energy and that front line terrorizing Baker Mayfield, and then this game you sort of get – okay, we'll pick and choose our spots. And they just seem to turn off there, and then boom, big play, boom. Big play, onside kick, and, all of a sudden a 14-point lead is over. And that one would be what concerns me with the Browns, if they can, at least maintain a record. They need to be able to defensively. They don't get the little rest. They have to win games defensively and with Nick Chubb. And they just didn't seem to bring it defensively this week. And I wonder if it's going to just sort of be that all season. One game we're going to get crazy harassment of the quarterback, corners and safeties flying around, and then, 1 week we get sort of, we're good enough to sort of just play our position and not have to come all that hard. And this sometimes is the result when that happens.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. But I don't know. Like I said, there's a lot of good things to this team. It just doesn't seem to come together at the right time for them, unfortunately. But a game that was winnable, a game that they probably should have won. But this is kind of like the theme for this show today is like upsets and those big spread covers, because they had this game won. They had a good lead, and the Jets came back and won. So you got to tip your hat off to the Jets.
The one thing I don't want to hear is we're getting a lot of Nick Chubb should have gone down right before the touchdown. Now, I'm an all fan for that, but that's when you're about to win the game and kick the game-winning field goal, or go right up to 7 and you don't want the other team to have the ball. I don't quite respond to it when you're going up 2 scores with 1:33 left in the game and the other team has 1 freaking timeout. So I didn't like that a lot of people were trying to put this on Nick Chubb because you assume as a professional football team you can put away a game up 2 scores with 1:33 left. So, I'm all for situational diving before you score the touchdown, but in an instance where you're going up 2 touchdowns, that just it seems like a scapegoat reason where maybe we should start looking at the defense and giving up huge chunk plays in the last 1:30 of a game where your only job is basically to keep everything in front of you.
Yeah, you called it. People are blaming Nick Chubb, and I personally would have liked them to work more clock management, but that's neither here nor there, because at the end of the day, you still, as a defense, have to stop the opposing team from scoring multiple scores, within a minute and a half. So you can't put it on him. If anything, you put on the entire team as a whole, or you put on the defense or the coaching staff. But you can't put it on him. He had a great game.
Yeah. How about don't get beat for a 65-yard pass with a minute to go? That would be my, I've given Joe Flacco a lot of guff, but I will say that last 5 minutes he was throwing darts. It almost looked like 2008 Joe Flacco.
Almost.
Bully up to him. I don't know if he can bring that every week, but looked like old school Joe Flacco in that one. And I will say, this Jets receiving corps it's a little frisky. They got the rookie Garrett Wilson. We mentioned, former Tennessee Titans White. We're just probably going to rub that in as much as we can. So nonetheless, I thought this Jets receiving corps looked pretty solid. So when Wilson gets back, maybe they can breathe a little life into their offensive game. Defensively, I'm not quite as sold. I know people seem to think the defense is okay, but, giving up 30 points to Cleveland they basically have 2 running backs and nothing else concerns me a little bit. All right, let's go to one of the games that wasn't a blowout. Lions sort of maintained control throughout. A couple scary spots here and there, but the one thing that never lets you down is the Washington Commies defense, which somehow has 75 first-round picks on it, but gets torched every week. What do you make of this Lions offense? Is it going to continue to be this explosive with Swift and Amon-Ra St. Brown and, Jared Goff? flinging the ball all over the place, or is this just a little bit of a nice little run here where you're playing 2 home games versus the Eagles and the Commies here?
Listen, I wish I could tell you I know what it is, but I really don't know what this is because you know how I am. I kind of, get a little soft spot in my heart for these hard knock teams. And, I got to watch the Lions during their training camp, and a lot of their players kind of grew on me. And I hope, I hope that they do good. And obviously Jared Goff, former Ram, I kind of, always hope nothing for the best for him. But you see the way that they're playing, and it catches you off guard. Now, I had the Lions winning this game. And I just didn't think they were going to dominate the way they did. I know that it was close in a few instances in that game, but I think overall, if you just watch the entire game, it was the Lions pretty much the entire day. Surprising, but entertaining to watch too. They're playing with a lot of grit. They don't have a lot of big name guys, especially on the defense side, other than their first round pick. But they're making plays, man, and I think that's like one of the coolest things about football is you take a team that a lot of people are considering to be probably the worst team in the NFC, if not the NFL, this season, and they're coming out, they're fighting, man. They're like dogs, and that's the kind of football I like to watch. I know that it's the Commies, but it's still, I think, pretty good for Detroit fans after like all the bad stuff they've gone through.
Yeah, I've been impressed. Rewatched the game today because I was in and out of this one. It wasn't like number one on my screen. And, that offense has looked legit 2 weeks in a row. Swift and Jamal Williams out of the backfield, we joked, but at some point we got to take this Amon-Ra St. Brown thing like legit serious. It's like 8 games now where he's had like 8 receptions and, at some point, it's probably not so much of a fluke. This is probably a pretty good, receiver in our league. So I don't know if they can keep scoring to the rate of like 35 points a game, especially when they hit a couple real defenses. But I do think they can sort of play with certainly every team in the NFC because, we're going to go through this list and I don't even know who we'd sort of check mark as, elite right now in the NFC side of things. So, I definitely think, I don't know if they can be good enough to quite get that playoff spot, but I certainly think they can play with most of these NFC teams and maybe catch a couple breaks and win a couple games that they probably shouldn't here.
Yeah, I mean, they're playing, with enough grit that they definitely could, pull up an upset here and there. If you don't watch out for this team, they're going to sneak up on you.
Yeah. Anything on the Commies? I made a comment about the defense. It's just not good. I don't know what to say. I don't know how it's not good. They have a lot of very high-level players, but, I mean, they should have lost that game the week before to Jacksonville. Jacksonville left a handful of plays on the field. They get torched this game offensively. Quite honestly, I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback quite like Carson Wentz. One play he's throwing a 60-yard dart between 3 defenders and hitting some guy in stride, and then the next one he's underhand pitching it to the other team. So anything on the Commies other than how long do you think Ron Rivera can sort of maintain job status? I got a couple coaches that are probably teetering on the brink here.
See, normally I would say that I think that he'd really be on the hot seat, but I think with the turmoil that this franchise is going through, it's made it so that they want a little bit of consistency, at least at one position within the organization. And, I mean, he's a great coach to have around. The people like him, fans like him. And he's a good coach. So I think that he's not really on the hot seat just yet. You add a few more losses to his record, especially if there's a chance where they might be able to compete for, the division, then I think then it starts to get a little warmer. But I think as of now, he's okay. I do want to say that Carson Wentz, I didn't have really high expectations for him. And even though he hasn't been great, he's definitely been better than I expected him to be.
If that defense to get into the situation he left and whether they actually have improved.
Yeah, I'm just saying that if they had that defense that they had a couple of seasons ago
Yeah.
with the mediocre play that they're getting on offense, and not downplaying it by saying mediocre, but you know,
They've been able to put points on the board, which,
yeah. I mean, now granted, it hasn't been against the elite of teams, but they're still doing their job. So, if they had that defense, they could be a pretty good team right now.
yeah, I don't know where that defense has gone, but it went far away. The other thing, I don't think a lot of people care in Washington anymore. There's not like a huge uprising to be like, fire him, because I honestly just think it's sort of hopeless. It's, we fire him, bring in somebody new. The same thing happens. The same thing has basically happened with Washington since Daniel Snyder, took over. There's been maybe 2 or 3 teams that you would even sort of consider relative to an NFL season. Even when they made the playoffs a couple of years ago, it was like an 8-8, 7-9 team. It wasn't like a team that was really anything you remember in your life of, we're going to talk about the Washington football team in the year they went 7-8 and almost beat the Tampa Bay Bucks in the first round of the playoffs. But what I think we can get a little bit more coaching hot seat here. Jags 24, Colts nothing. Now, I talked about it on our show on Friday that I thought the Jags could be spunky and play with them. They seem to own the Colts a little bit here, but this game was over by halftime, and basically both teams shook hands and rolled it up and just ran this clock out the whole second half. There was just nothing from the Colts here, and the Jags just whipped them for the first half, and game over. Before we get to the Jags, how long do you think Frank Wright has? We're on 5th quarterback in all 5 of his years. Some of that is not his fault. Andrew Luck freakily retired, and then you're, left sitting there with a team that's contending, and you're probably trying to grab straws on a veteran quarterback. But when you're doing that, you're getting either 2 at the end of their life in Rivers and, Ryan, and then 1 who, Lord knows what you're going to get, not even week to week, but snap to snap.
Play to play.
Basically. So how hot do you think this seat is for Frank Wright? I like Frank Wright, but I think I told you today, the Colts do the same thing. They're going to start 2-6, 2-5, 3-7, and then they'll make this little run at the end of the year to, try to get in there. But patience has to be wearing out from the Colts side of things here.
See, and that's the thing is, do you really expect it right now, as it sits with them? Where are they 1-1?
Yeah, they should have lost that Texans game too. It was a miracle.
Yeah,
game.
I mean, let's just say it. Let's just count it as a loss, just for it's early in the season. So let's just say 0-2. Let's say they lose the next the next 4 out of the next 6. And then somehow they start winning games towards the end of the season. Do you think that saves his job? I just think that at this point, now I know the Andrew Luck situation wasn't really, very unfortunate, but besides that, you had Rivers there who, say what you want to say, he did pretty good. I know that he wasn't, his San Diego self, but he did pretty good. You get the Wentz experiment, it doesn't work out there. Now you got Matt Ryan, who doesn't look anything near. I mean, even going back to last season, he doesn't look anything close to what he was.
All I know is that interception bet was over within 35 seconds. I think I was sending a group text message of catch 'em, baby.
But, I mean, listen, at some point you have to take some responsibility for what you're doing. He's managing that team.
Yeah.
He's got to bring the best out of these guys, and he's got like an all-star freaking running back. The offensive line, granted, they've been giving up a lot of sacks lately, and they're not really good in pass protection. But when it comes to run blocking, they're definitely doing their job there. The defense at one point was really, really good. We're talking about, playoff contender good. And it's kind of nowhere. And now you look at them, and they're, let's just say 0-2. I know they're 0-1-1, but let's say 0-2 to start the season. And if I'm a Colts fan, I don't care if you win the last 8 games of the season and are playing for a playoff spot in that last game because I know you're going to lose. That's what they've been doing over the last couple of seasons. At some point, this repetitive cycle has to get pretty old.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Jeff Fisher's tenure with the Rams, where it always got off to a slow start. Then they'd find a little rhythm, at some point in the season. But now those teams probably were definitely not as talented as this Colts team.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but
Other than
nonetheless,
Steven Jackson.
yeah, nonetheless, it was still, it's. How about we play consistently throughout and not start, 0-6 and then have to win 5 games to claw back to 500. And then, we're in a dogfight to get into the playoffs. It's just, you're 0-1 and you've basically played the Texans and the Jags.
You should be 2-0 at this point.
Now, I'm going to get into the Jags, and quite frankly, from what I've seen the first 2 weeks, they probably are the favorite right now in the AFC South, which probably is more a detriment to what we've seen football playing wise out of the AFC South than anything. But the defense is not what the defense should be. The offense is just now. They didn't have Michael Pittman. They were running with, but it's always something with this Colts team. It's always something. It can't always be something. You have to get wins, and I didn't look where their bye was, but even if he's won 2 games, if they're 2 or 3 games below 500, I don't think you can save this situation. I think it's probably about time, and he's sort of run his course here.
The sad thing about this whole situation is that over the last couple of seasons that the Colts have actually been playoff competitive, they always seem to be, right on the Titans' heels.
Yeah.
And it seems like, the Titans got to be careful. If they lose the next couple of games, the Colts could take over the division. And the Titans would lose, games that they should have won. And you're thinking that this Colts team is going to win this easy game, this gimme, and they would lose. And it seems like they don't want to take that next step. Yeah. It's almost like it's a mental thing at this point. And when stuff like that starts to affect the franchise, it's time for an overhaul. And I'm not saying that that's the case right now, but if things keep going that way, I mean, it's time to definitely start looking into it, I think.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about, teams' windows here. And, honestly, I think both the Colts and Titans, that door is closing quick. Because you look at this Jags team, you look at that Texans team, the way they play, and the amount of draft picks they have coming up, that window for Colts and Titans to be contenders, I think is closing quick, because I think the Jags and the Texans are starting to sort of rebuild and find their form. Now, let's switch things to the Jags. Honestly, we've watched 2 games, and I've watched pretty much every one of these teams play all their games. Right now, I think the Jags are the best team in that AFC South. Lawrence looks like a whole different quarterback. You saw it in this game. He was flinging the ball around and throwing darts all over the place. The run game seems pretty solid with Etienne and Robinson. I think the defense probably can be had a little bit, but we talked about it on Friday. They got some explosive playmakers. The Georgia kid looks really, really good. We both sort of questioned that first-round pick, but he's played really, really well. They got Josh Allen, the defensive one, not the quarterback one, on the other end of that. I'm curious your thoughts here. Do you think Tennessee or the Colts find themselves? Or do you think this Jags team has already sort of jumped them a little bit, so far to this season?
I'm expecting a bit of a bounce back from either the Titans or the Colts, and that's not to say that I truly believe that these teams are going to do it. It's more of this is what we've seen over the last couple of seasons, so it's the first 2 weeks of the season, and it's really hard for us to not get excited about the results that we've seen from certain teams like the Jaguars. I mean, they're undefeated right. I mean, they're 1-1 right now, and based off how they did last season, you got to be excited. Even if you're not a Jaguars fan, to see this young team succeed the way they're doing. To me, the biggest surprise for this team has been the addition of Kirk. I kind of laughed at the signing. I was taken aback by the numbers and all that, but watching him on the field, it seems like they weren't paying for expectations of what his skill set looks like to everybody else. They were paying based off the expectations on his fit with this team, and it seems like that they're building a team that fits together as opposed to trying to put together the best players at each position.
Yeah. I heard something that probably it makes sense. He's probably a $20 million receiver that sort of got 40 because there's a tax, to make a free agent move to Jacksonville. And that's just sort of, okay, you want me to come to Jacksonville, you got to pay me a little bit more money here. And he's been great. I think we both questioned a little bit the amount of money, but, all in all, if he's going to play like this, I think you're more than happy with it. Watching Hollywood Brown and Christian Kirk, I just get a little bit of a giggle because I think we're seeing what sort of receiver Hollywood Brown is, and Christian Kirk has been great. All right, I apologize for us covering these next 3 games because this was just brutal television to watch. Bucs Saints 2010. 2010 is flattering because this game was basically 6-3 up into, I don't know, 8 minutes left into the fourth quarter. And then Brady made a throw, and Jameis Winston decided to get kerosene and some matches and set fire to the Superdome. And I don't mean that he was throwing darts. I mean he literally set the place on fire. They came out with the Jameis has bruised ribs afterwards. Honestly, I think that switch needs to be made to Andy Dalton. It's just we've seen Jameis. We know what Jameis is. Yeah, you might get 1 or 2 throws where he drops a 70-yard bomb right on the money. But basically, like I said, this was a 6-3 game, and on like 4 straight possessions, he threw picks. That can't be done. That's not even like Carson Wentz level, inconsistency. That just can't be done by an NFL quarterback. So as good as that Saints defense was, they aren't going to score points on offense with Jameis Winston there because he's going to give the other team points too. And basically that's what the Tampa Bay defense said. They said we didn't need to score points because we knew Jameis would give us one. And he did.
I mean, the biggest problem with Jameis is the fact that he's been inconsistent in his time in New Orleans. You see flashes of the highly touted prospect, and then you see Jameis Winston, the guy who led the league in interceptions. And it's just because of that, I do agree with you. Stafford has somebody
coming for him, by the way.
Because of that, I do agree with you. I do think that it's time to possibly start thinking about a change at the quarterback position. But the problem is that I really do think that Jameis is like universally liked in that locker room. And I think that's why he's the starting quarterback right now, because based off what I'm seeing, at least on film, I don't see anything that leads me to believe that the next guy up can't do just as bad or good. I mean, what's the right word here?
They can all probably throw 4 interceptions in a game and 4 straight possessions.
And when Brady's having a game like he was, I know he hasn't been good over the last couple games, but when he's having that type of game, you got to take advantage, especially a divisional game. You're not going to get a lot of these chances. You got to pull off this win, and Jameis Winston couldn't rally his troops to do so. The most entertaining part of that game really was the fight, between the receivers. But now I'm one receiver short unless he decides to appeal.
Yeah, let's switch things to the Bucs. This defense is really, really good. It might be easily the best in the NFC and one of the best in the league. But offensively, it wasn't just this game. It was the Cowboys game too. Now, their margin of victory has been great. They're 2-0. But this offense looks brutal. Basically, Brady made one throw to the tight end that got them the win, But how far do you think this Bucs team can go? Because they are in the NFC, so you give them a little bit of a pass. Because honestly, every one of those teams in the NFC is horribly flawed right now. But their offense looks dreadful right now. Just dreadful. I know they've come up against two really good defensive teams in the Saints and the Cowboys, but wow, the offense has been bad.
Yeah, and definitely you do give them a little bit of slack because they have played, some pretty decent defenses for the first two games. But this is also Tom Brady. A lot of people were questioning his reason for returning, and you just give it to him. The guy has won multiple championships, so you just assume he's driven. He's driven to win. He wants to win. This is what drives him. And then he comes out and he plays the way he's been playing, and I don't know. I really don't know. I know that they have some injury concerns. Godwin was in there this game, and we don't know what his availability is going forward. But now you're talking about Mike Evans will probably get suspended for a game. They say he might appeal, but even if he does appeal, at some point he's probably going to have to serve a suspension. So there's just too many issues in and out with receivers leaving last season with the Antonio Brown situation. That you have Gronkowski. I know that he wasn't really performing to the Gronk level, but he was a safety blanket, not just at a comfort zone for Brady. They've got all that chemistry. You got all these pieces going away, and it's hard to maintain the same caliber of team that you had when you won the Super Bowl when half those guys are gone now. So yeah. I'm not going to hold too much against them. I think that they can pick it up, especially once they get healthy, but there's definitely some signs to be concerned.
Yeah, for sure. The bowl of mediocre, Giants-Panthers. The Giants come out on top 19-16. I don't even know what to say in this game. Giants are 2-0. Carolina's 0-2. Both could be 0-2. Both could be 1-1. Both could be whatever. It was just sort of a mediocre game of poor to okay quarterback play, solid running back play. I don't even want to go like good defense. It's just two mediocre teams. Now, that being said, the Giants play the Cowboys on Monday night. They probably could be 3-0. So, I mean, your only goal is to win, and that's sort of why I moved them into second place in that NFC East. But you see anything from either of these teams that thrills your soul?
No, I mean, unless you want to just look at the records, if that's the case, then the Giants are great, man. They're awesome. But the reality of it is, we've seen these performances, and although it's definitely something to be excited about because there hasn't been a lot of things to be excited about in New York, you also want to slow your expectations down a bit and let's see them play against the elite teams or the good teams and see how they perform against them. That would be a good barometer. The Panthers, man, McCaffrey's been healthy for the first two games and they just can't get it going. You thought Baker was going to be a better option than they had before with Darnold, and it's just not clicking. I don't want to spend too much time on these games, but it's mediocre football right now. Yeah. Maybe both these teams will pick it up.
Last thing on this, how long do you think Rule has here? That would be the other coach.
To me, he's one of the coach, probably the hottest seats for coaches right now. Just because, as I said, they've had opportunities now. You chalk it up to guys not being healthy or missing a certain key piece here and there, and they've addressed certain situations at least to the best of their ability, and it's still not working. So maybe it's the head coach. I don't know, but something's got to change because you can't. No offense to the Giants, but in my opinion, I thought that the Panthers were a better team, and they just didn't show it.
Well, that's the thing. I think the Panthers have had two straight games where they've been the better team, and if you want to look at it, probably played better, and they've lost both games. Now, a little of that probably has to do with fluke, but some of that has to do with just decision making and not getting the best out of what you're putting out there. Next game, we're still in the Mediocre Bowl. This one might not even be the Mediocre Bowl. This might be two really bad team bowl. Patriots-Steelers, 17-14. Basically, this game was decided by two muffed punts. New England muffed theirs. Luckily, it traveled into the end zone, and the guy fell on it, and that's a touchback. Pittsburgh muffed theirs, did not get the touchback, gave the Patriots the ball on the 5, and the Patriots scored. But other than that, I'm not sure what else happened in this game because these two teams are really, really bad right now.
Yeah. Well, listen. Honestly, other than those two punt muffs, I thought this game went kind of the way I expected it. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because, unfortunately, both these teams are kind of in the middle of the pack here. But the defense for the Steelers, I thought did okay without Watt, but you definitely noticed that he's not there. But Fitzpatrick, I thought, really stepped up in this game, and a lot of positive signs for both teams here. Going forward. It's early in the season, so there's still a lot of room for growth.
One question, I guess I wouldn't pull the trigger yet, and I'm not really a believer in Pickett, but how long do you go with Trubisky here before you just see what you have in the rookie? He's not good enough to really carry your team to win, so at that point, it's probably just better off that you see what you have in the rookie so you can start planning for next season. I don't think you quite go there yet, but, honestly, if you watch this team, you can't think they're really going to be contending for a playoff spot out of the AFC. So how long do you think you go before you make that switch?
I wish I can give you a clear answer here, but I really can't. And the reason I can't is because I don't really see Coach making a switch mid-season, and the reason is he hasn't been that coach, at least since he's been with the Steelers. He hasn't been the type of coach to lay his arms down. This guy's going to fight to the better end, try his best to get at least into a wild card spot, make the playoffs. That's the mentality for this guy, and that's the philosophy he's built in that organization. So I can't really, but if it was me, I would say that it depends on how the rest of the division is doing. If it looks like you're not going to contend like the rest of the division is going away.
Yesterday, everybody lost.
That's what I'm saying. This is exactly why I said it depends on how the division's doing. If it's where you can still compete, then I think you stick with Trubisky. He's had at least his feet in the fire, so to speak, a little bit. He's been in battles here and there, so you keep him in there. If it starts going the wrong way, where you're just not winning games and the division's starting to pull away from you, then maybe you make a change and you kind of see what you got in him. But I think as of now, you stay put, until things change.
Yeah. All right. This game was a little bit better, but I think there's still question marks. Rams 31, Falcons 27 here. Rams offense looked much better. They at least seemed to get Allen Robinson involved a little bit more.
Playing Buffalo's defense will do that to you.
Yeah, when you come up against the Falcons defense, which basically I think was set in a prevent for the whole 4 quarters there, got up big and then just sort of this was one of the games I was talking about where they don't seem to be able to, run the ball consistently enough to sort of salt these games away. And then, it's all fun and good, gunslinger Matt Stafford, but you can't be gunslinging. Basically, Mariota threw that ball up, and if that receiver hadn't mistimed his jump, he probably catches that ball over Ramsey, and the Rams probably lose this stupid game when they were up 28-3.
Listen, now you're not going to sway me on this one, okay? Ramsey was going to out-jump him no matter what. All right.
Well, yeah, but that guy had the inside. So if he just took off like 5 minutes early and was already coming down. Now, great play by Ramsey, but the receiver had the inside. He just mistimed his jump.
Listen, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. You can't get me off of this branch. But no, I get where you're coming from. It's definitely a little concerning, but I was on Twitter and I was listening to Ram fans, and there was a lot of concern from Ram fans. And calm down. It's the first couple of weeks of the season. You've got that Super Bowl hangover. You're missing a few guys that you had last year, so you're not the same team. But to me, when I was watching this game, to me it seemed more like McVay was trying to implement something. He was trying to use this game, which he thought was probably an easy win, which turned out not to be. But he was using this game to try and implement certain things. He talked about how he wanted Akers to be more involved, and he got more involved in this game. But just watching the game, I still think that Henderson right now is the better running back. So I don't know. Maybe you take a step back, keep Akers in a more of a third down role. I mean, he's a good pass catcher also. So I think Henderson right now is the better back.
Yeah, I'm not worried. We talked about this in our preseason, preview. They can sort of dick around and goof around because the NFC is so bad. We just talked about Tampa Bay, probably right now the best team in the NFC, and they can't score points on offense. The Rams seem a little inconsistent on both sides right now, but, they'll be fine. We watched the Packers, and, yeah, they played much better than they did the week before, but, I mean, if they give Fields a touchdown, it's in a 7-point game. And granted, the Eagles have looked good, but, win over Detroit and then win over, we got the bad Minnesota, so I'm not quite ready to crown them champions yet. So I think the Rams have plenty of time to space this out, especially in this NFC side of things. But you just sort of look at it, and it's not quite right this second, and they sort of got to figure that running game thing out so they can put these games away. Like I said, it was 28-3, and then they still had Stafford, goofing around and throwing weird tight passes and a couple picks. And the other thing, it probably won't get noted, but punting-wise, we both talked about it. They cut the punter because, granted they had to cut salary, and he's a veteran, so he makes way more money than, most punters should. But that sort of reared its head a couple times here, and I think it might rear its head a couple more times in the season. Hopefully they can get that worked out, because that's the kind of thing that does cost you playoff games, like a blocked punt or something like that.
Oh, definitely so. It's the small things that no one really talks about, but definitely missed me some Hecker. I understand why they had to let him go, but you notice the difference with some of these better, punters, and not just that, the entire special teams unit as a whole. But that's neither here nor there. Let's not spend too much time on this game because it wasn't, nothing to write home about. But the Rams got the win, and the Falcons performed pretty good. And, I mean, there was some nice things there. So,
all right, next one we won't spend too much time on other than the Trey Lance thing because basically Seattle was borderline a college team in this game. Lance goes down on, I think, second or third series, breaks his ankle, and honestly, I think it's a concern now because you look at this guy's career, and it's basically probably going to be really sad. He played his redshirt freshman year at North Dakota State, led them to the subdivision championship. That's when you started to hear buzz about him being a first-round pick. That COVID season hits. He has to, he doesn't get to play that season. Then he gets drafted by the 49ers, who already have a quarterback, who are already contenders. So basically he sits out the next season. And, I mean, basically you could count this as sitting out the season as well. He played a game on a field that was basically a swimming pool in a storm and got 2 series in this game. And it's basically when he comes back next year, he will not really have played football for 4 years. And he always needed development, and it's hard to get it if you haven't played football. And now you add a broken ankle onto that. Now, I read it wasn't like, it's hard to say serious ankle, but it wasn't one of those where, it splits, in half and it's hanging sideways like this on the field. But so it wasn't like a compound fracture, but I still think it's a mental thing to overcome. I mean, you've seen it from Dak, who basically chose not to run at all last year. And then you look at some NBA guys who have had this, because it's a little more common in basketball, but Gordon Hayward has not been the same basketball player since that. Paul George basically was a relentless driver and basically changed his game into a jump shooter. A really good jump shooter and still a great player. But I think that sort of affects you, and I just worry that, he's never even going to get a chance for his career to even start in this thing.
Yeah, listen, it's really unfortunate. As you mentioned, he had to go through all those obstacles coming out of college and then getting to the pros, having to sit behind Jimmy G when Jimmy G was leading his team to playoff victories. And then he finally gets his shot. They have a playoff caliber team, and he gets the call. It's your team now. You're going to lead us to victory. And he comes out. He has a horrible, not horrible, he has a bad game. It's his first week in muddy, nasty conditions against these Bears. So you hope that he's going to pick it up against divisional rival Seattle, and he gets hurt. And the crazy thing about it is I didn't even notice that he had gotten hurt when I was first watching the game. It just all of a sudden the play just stopped, and you saw players kind of starting to huddle around him. And I was like, oh, something's going on. I didn't even know who it was. As you mentioned, it wasn't as bad as it looked. That's the best way that I could put it, because it looked pretty nasty.
Yeah.
But it wasn't as bad as it looked. But the Niners, here's some silver linings. If you're the 49ers, you're a 49er fan, you got Jimmy G sitting on the bench, the guy who led you to these set playoff wins and Super Bowl appearance. This is the guy. He was your backup. Now you've got him as a starter again. And for Jimmy G, a guy who made a pretty good amount of money with this team already, I don't know if you saw, but he's getting a $250,000 bonus for each game he plays.
Well, basically, he's going to get his contract that he renegotiated back because he's the starter now.
Yeah, he's gonna make a pretty good chunk of change this year. But listen, I think the big concern now is, can you get Jimmy G going? Because after the whole thing that happened where, you're our guy, you're no longer our guy, we're trying to trade you, we can't trade you, we need you to renegotiate so you can stay here. After all that, does that affect his mentality going forward for the long term? Because, listen, he won this game, against the Seattle team that didn't play as well. Maybe they gave too much that week one game against the Broncos, and they were a little pooped out for this one because they didn't play the same way. But going forward, is he still the same guy? Is he still going to play with the same type of mentality that we saw from him from a couple seasons ago? Or does the fact that they basically shunned him and wanted to get rid of him just didn't happen? Does that affect his mentality? I don't know. I think that's the big question going forward.
Yeah. The only thing I look forward to is everybody slurping him up, and then in the playoff game when they decide to throw 8 passes because they don't trust him, and everybody going, oh, yeah, this is why we didn't want him anymore. That's always the fun part of the season. But nonetheless, nothing on the Seahawks. They look dreadful, and I don't want to hammer Geno Smith, but you see basically every pass was a 2-yard check down. There's being conservative and safe, and then there's not even giving your team a chance to move the ball. I know he doesn't want to throw picks, but you got DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. You got to occasionally push that ball downfield. You can't just check down, and then you're 24 of 28 for 147 yards. That does nobody any good.
Well, you saw him in the last game. He pushed the ball a little more than we're used to seeing him do it, and they had some success. Now, granted, you got to have a little bit of a running attack to be able to open up some lanes, so that also affected it a little bit. But, yeah, you're right. He did try a few deep passes, but it seemed like they were more of a, hopefully he gets it type of pass, and it just didn't work out for them. Now, I mean, the 49ers team is going to be tough regardless of who the quarterback is here. So don't take too much away from them. But we also didn't expect much from Seattle coming into this season.
We need to merge Drew Lock and Geno Smith into one quarterback. One who will just chuck it anywhere and throws 50 picks, and the other who refuses to throw it beyond 3 yards.
Geno Lock or Drew Smith?
One of those needs to become a hybrid QB of somewhere in between, and we might be okay. Cowboys Bengals. We'll talk about the Cowboys defense because the offense, I mean, it wasn't there. I know everybody loves Cooper Rush. But they scored that opening touchdown and then proceeded not to really do anything for the rest of the game. But I think this Bengals thing needs to be talked about. Wow. Joe Burrow is on pace to be sacked 101 times on this season. I don't know if that will keep up. You know, they have played, Watt, Steelers, and, the Cowboys with Micah Parsons. But how much of this do you think is more the Bengals sort of regressing back to what we thought the Bengals sort of were up until the playoff run, and how much of this is just, a little flukish? You run up against two really, high-level pass rushing defense and just some bad luck here.
I think it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. You look at this Bengals team. First of all, it's a little concerning if you're a Bengals fan because the last time we saw this quarterback get sacked that much, he ended up on the IR for the year. So it's a little concerned. You want to protect your young quarterback. But again, I think it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, because they play two tough defenses that can get after the quarterback. So you got to take that into consideration. But also, there's no consistency on this offensive line. You have a lot of new guys, new pieces that they brought in to try and fix the offensive line and their woes that they had last season, which was one of their biggest issues. The problem is that they just haven't been in battles in the trenches together long enough for there to be that trust factor of, I know this guy's going to pick up that that pass rusher because he's going to take care of this guy. You just don't have that right now, and maybe as the season progresses, they get better. But again, this team is in the AFC, a division, a conference that's gotten a lot better over since last season. They don't have the luxury of waiting this out for it to fix itself. They have to get it fixed. They have to get it fixed now. They're in a tough division, division that's very competitive. So they have to try to get this fixed now. If not, then as good as this team is, as many weapons as they have, I think that there's a slight possibility that if you can't protect your quarterback, there's no way you're going to win any games.
Yeah, I was just going to say they sort of have the opposite of the Rams here, who can sort of tinker around and try this, try that, build to try to get into the playoffs because they have that cushion. The Bengals don't really have that much of a cushion. You think about it, they got 2 losses right now. What we say, Buffalo, Kansas City, maximum number of losses, probably 4. They're already halfway there. So thinking about grabbing like that top spot is already sort of on the fringes of occurring. And it's just, we'll see what they can do. I don't think the defense looks great either. So that might be a question mark because basically they've also come against right now, the worst offenses in the league.
Listen, okay? You can't take anything away from that defense, right? They had to go up against Cooper Rush, all right? And Trubisky. If that doesn't strike fear into the defensive coordinator, I don't know what will, all right? So don't come on, go easy on them.
Yeah. All right. So let's flip things to the Cowboys here. Really nice win. It sort of keeps them alive. I got to broach something with you. I think Micah Parsons might be coming for the defensive champ in Aaron Donald here. That guy is ridiculous. He was in the backfield the whole freaking game. I don't know if he's quite grabbed him yet, but Parsons right now just looks on a different level than everybody else on the defensive end.
Listen, you give me a guy. Don't get me wrong. Micah Parsons was actually my pick for Defensive Player of the Year, if you remember. So I'm not trying to take anything away from him. He's a great defensive player. But give me a couple years of him being Defensive Player of the Year or runner-up Defensive Player of the Year, all-pro consecutive for X amount of years. Give me a few years of that, and then maybe we can start talking about him taking over Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald's been doing it for a while now, and not just for a while. He's been doing it consistently. And not just consistently, they've been getting wins. They got a ring. So, that you got to take all that into consideration. So, Micah Parsons, great player, but, stealing super high, but there's still a long way to go before
I'm just telling you, he's eyeing that championship belt. Bob Arum is getting involved right now to not give us the fight. So, he was amazing in that game. That's
he was
one of the best. You can't really call him a linebacker because he literally lines up in six different positions.
He's such a hybrid. You could just put him in multiple different positions. That's why I picked him, just because he's such a headache for offenses to figure out. You have to locate him. You have to locate where he's at all times and adjust your protection accordingly. Yeah. So he's a disruptor, man. I really like watching him play.
Yeah. All right. Let's move to Texans Broncos. Once again, I apologize for having to review this game. I'm telling you right now, you're going to have to start shutting down your Russell Wilson love because he was brutal in this game, and this game was really, really bad. And the other thing is, I'm not one to hammer like first-year coaches, but Nathaniel Hackett is starting to make me raise some eyebrows here in game management sort of situations. Let's give him a month. Let's give him a little time and figure out how to call plays and manage games. But it's been really bad as well on that side of the ball. I can't think you thought the Broncos were going to come out and play this badly. The Seahawks game is one thing, but they were bad in this game, and that's a home game versus the Texans.
Well, let's remember, a couple of days ago when we were recording our pick show, if I'm not mistaken, what were they, a double-digit spread favorite?
Yeah, they were about a 10-point favorite.
I mean, even Vegas thought that this was a complete mismatch. And I think a lot of us just looked at the Seahawks game and we're like, you know what? Russell Wilson coming back home, the crowd's booing him, all these different emotions. The defense knows what he's got. So we just kind of chalked it up to week one, mishaps. But going into this Texans game, I also thought the Broncos were going to win. Now, I really didn't feel comfortable about that spread, but I thought the Broncos would win this game. And they ended up winning it, but it wasn't in the way that I thought it was going to happen.
I don't mark this as a win. It might go as a win, but
in the books, it counts as a win. But I get where you're coming from. It was just an ugly performance, and me, I'm always singing Russell Wilson's praises, but I have to call it as I see it, and he's been playing really bad, and I don't know if there's a lack of confidence there, with the new location, and I don't know what's going on, but he also looks a little bit heavier than we've seen him in last couple seasons. So his ability to scramble isn't quite what it has been before, but he's just got to play better, man. This is one of those teams that we just thought was going to be a wrecking ball coming out of the AFC West, and they're just not doing anything. And I know they got the win, but I mean, can you really count it as a win?
Yeah, this is what I keep into my mind when I think maybe they sneak into the playoffs and I get a free money bet watching this team because whoever's going to play them is going to crush them. So, anything on the Texans other than I think we both respect how spunky they play. They just probably aren't good enough to really win games, and that's sort of how this played out.
I still respect the fact that even after all the losses they had, all the drama that they've been going through over the last couple seasons, you know, they're putting themselves in position for success in the future. But at least they're playing respectable football right now.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of game mismanagement, welcome to Las Vegas. The Raiders got up 20-0. The Cardinals looked atrocious, would be kind. And then the Raiders decided they no longer wanted to play football for the second half. Now, that being said, Arizona didn't exactly come out in the second half and were gangbusters either. But because the Raiders kept giving them chances, eventually Arizona seized those chances. And then, I came in with high hopes for Josh McDaniel, but this game I thought was terribly mismanaged. And if you're out there getting outcoached by Kingsbury, who on the 2-point conversion calls a timeout, then gets to delay a game, and then has to go 8 yards for the 2-point conversion. Granted, the Raiders gave it up. Now, there was a shady little holding call in there, but nonetheless, which one of these are you higher on here right now, or are we just pretending these two teams don't exist?
Listen, I'm a little higher on the Raiders simply because they're paying for proven talent in Devontae Adams, whereas Arizona's paying for guys that just can't get over the hump in Murray. And going back to our preseason show, I talked about having the Raiders as possibly my fourth team in the AFC West, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that, one, I didn't trust McDaniels. I don't care what you say. I know that he's done it before. He was a head coach, and didn't really work out for him. So he went back to coordinating again, back to his old stomping grounds. So what was it about the first time as an offensive coordinator that didn't translate to a head coach that all of a sudden is going to happen now? So that was one of my concerns, was the head coaching. And the other one was Derek Carr. It just seems that so many instances where he should just, be rolling, he seems to really not bring the energy and puts himself behind the 8 ball. And that's what happened in this game, because this game was pretty much a done deal, I thought. And they just laid down and they let the Cardinals back into the game. If you're a Cardinal fan, that's been a really exciting comeback win. But I mean, if you're a Raider fan, it's disappointing because that game was pretty much done with, and I don't even know how they managed to make a comeback. But you have to blame the head coach on that, because there was some bad play calls, there was some bad clock management, and ultimately, I think you change those things, and the game is altered, at least the way it finished.
Yeah, and then you get a reprieve in overtime. You get the ball, you got it on the 44, you're indoors with one of the better kickers, and you throw 3 straight times, and twice to a guy who just fumbled the play before, and then he fumbles again. And it's like, how about you run the ball with Josh Jacobs, who was averaging about 6 yards a carry? I don't know. Or maybe you do that in the second half instead of going 3 and out and burning no seconds off the clock. Just poor management all along. Nice little comeback by the Cardinals. They showed a little life. I'm not going to be real aggressive in taking them again next week just because the last 8 minutes of the game they showed a little life, because they were pathetic for 3/4 of it. So, yeah, really disappointed more in the Raiders here than anything. All right, Green Bay and the Bears. The Bears aren't very good on offense. I guess they're okay on defense. Packers came out, played a little bit more like I thought they'd play this season, where they basically just handed the ball to Jones and Dillon, and then, let Aaron Rodgers make a couple passes. Anything really to break down deep in this game, it was, I don't know. This wasn't a football game. The Packers are much better than the Bears.
Yeah, it just, the only thing is just a very shocking difference with the way that Field, now it's not a huge difference, but very shocking just how poorly Fields played this game, going up against what you think is a lesser defense compared to the one he went up against the prior week. So, but yeah, not too much here. Packers just a better team, and they got the easy W.
Yeah. All right. Monday night, Bills 41-7. I talked about it on Friday. How I think the Bills are going to be one of that team that lights everybody up pretty much all season long. Even with a couple banged up injuries, the Titans are not really a match for the Bills, despite some propaganda about the Titans' ability to upset teams. The only thing that I come away from this game is, once again, Derrick Henry, 10 carries, 15 yards. I don't know if we sound the alarm bells in week 2, but it's getting closer and closer to sounding alarm bells. If you don't have him carrying your offense, and now you don't even have receivers to really burn anybody on the play action, what do you have sort of as an outlook for this Titans team right now?
I guess a positive outlook here is that you at least got Robert Woods somewhat involved in this game compared to the last game. And the receivers seem to be trying to at least come along. But the problem is Derrick Henry just isn't playing like Derrick Henry. And if he's not playing like Derrick Henry, then you don't have to load the box. You can bring in that extra, speedy guy in coverage, and you can cause fits for these young receivers all day long. When your veteran guy is Robert Woods, no offense, I love Robert Woods. You know me, I'm a big Bobby Trees guy. But when he's your number one, he's your veteran, he's the main guy, and all the other guys are just a bunch of young players. Defense, especially like a defense like this, like the Bills, championship caliber defense, they're just going to feast. And they were pinning their ears back.
Once they get up. Once they get up, it's done.
Oh yeah, you saw Von Miller. He was licking his chops. He had his ears pinned back, and he was getting after the quarterback. This Bills teams, man. Just listen. I'm like you. I don't like taking double-digit spreads. If I do, it's probably on the dog side because these are professional teams. But I took 10.5 for the Bills. You took an even crazier one that I couldn't even believe. But it was.
I call it the Dynamite Special. Bills minus 23.5.
My favorite part was, getting up for work and looking at my phone and looking at our group chat, and it says, "I'm just going to leave this here." That was beautiful. I don't think he's posted on that.
He hasn't spoken all day, mind you.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. But listen, this Bills team, man, if they could stay healthy, how are they not the favorites to win it all?
Yeah.
They're just so good on every facet of the game: special teams, defense, offense. The quarterback's playing really good. Wide receivers having a monster year. Stephon Diggs, man, what was 3 touchdowns?
Well, yeah, when you man him up every time. Versus I knew he was going to launch a ball 70 yards off his back foot. That doesn't signal a recipe for success. But yeah, you mentioned it. I sang Josh Allen's praises last week, but he is on fire right now. And I thought what was more important, they didn't even have to run him this game. I think that's very big to sort of, I don't want to say save his body, but he doesn't need to be running in a game like this and risking himself. Playoff games, big games, go at it. But in this kind of game, let him launch deep balls to Diggs as they, for some reason, man up Stephon Diggs. But yeah, there's nothing. Bills are going to be really, really good as long as health sort of permits here. Let's flip to the other game, and I don't want to do what I told you so, but I warned you about falling in love with this Minnesota Vikings team. And do I say you got Vikinged, or do I say you got Cousins? Or do I just say you got Viking Cousins here? Because they were awful. Really, really bad.
Yeah, I guess you could say I got scolded. Is that what they say? Man, I really thought just based off how the Eagles' defense had performed over the last their last game, I really thought that this offense for the Vikings would be able to put together a potent enough attack that they would at least get within striking range, but this wasn't even close. I mean, they just could not get anything going. And again, I fell for it, and I say it every week. It seems like every week that I talk about the Vikings, I say they are the most Jekyll and Hyde team in recent history, at least as far as I can remember. They look amazing last week. It looked like there's no stopping them. Justin Jefferson's all over the place, doing the gritty. Is that what they call it?
Yes.
At my age, you don't know about these new dances, so. But he's out there doing the gritty. You got Cook running all over the place. You got Thielen with the yellow gloves, and then they come out this week and they look completely flat. I mean, if this is not the most Jekyll and Hyde team in history, then it's got to be at least a close second.
Yeah. Turns out Kevin O'Connell isn't a football messiah. Putting Jefferson in motion did not solve all ills because Darius Slay locked him up and he couldn't get free at all. Cousins did Cousins primetime things, which he always does. And I think we saw the Minnesota defense exposed a little bit. They found a nice rhythm versus Green Bay, but I don't think Green Bay was really ready to play in that game. Now, that's a game Minnesota had to have, but honestly, I think the Vikings are just going to have to win shootouts. And when they don't get into games where they can shoot out and score 7 points, they're probably going to lose. Eagles side of thing, really was impressed with Hurts. I think Hurts has come to the point now where he's going to win you NFL regular season games. I think you go to that sort of spin it forward question. Can he win you playoff games now? Because I think you got a good, solid NFL quarterback. I don't know if he can make every throw you need him to do, and is probably still a little bit of a, one receiver look kind of guy, but he'll win you NFL football games, and it just sort of, can he win you playoff games now? But I was really impressed with Hurts in this game.
Yeah, as was I. I've been kind of singing his praise over the last couple of last couple of weeks, and going back to last season, and he shows a lot of really good things. His ability to scramble and extend the play is one of the best right now in the league. My concern with him is his development doesn't seem to be moving fast enough at the pace that you need it to be for him to be a playoff winning quarterback. He's getting there, but as you mentioned, you catch him in too many instances staring down receivers, and once you get later on to playing those elite defenses, they're going to feast on you if you keep staring down AJ Brown all game long, and not just that, his availability, his durability, that is also a concern. Because when you have to run the ball this much, don't get me wrong, I like how exciting it is. It's exciting to watch. But when you have to run the ball to be this successful as a quarterback, I mean, you saw what happened with Lamar Jackson. You get banged up, season's pretty much over. So, good for them. They got a good win here, and they looked really good doing it. But there's definitely some concerns going forward. But it's nothing that can't be fixed with a little bit of development.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, that wraps up the week. We'll be back on Friday for our picks and bets show. Be sure to check that out. Dynamite David will be in the studio tomorrow for our college football picks and bets show. Tough week for the Dynamite last week. Tough week for me on the college front last week. Double losers. So not a great week for us. Got a little bit better on the NFL side of things. But nonetheless, be on the lookout for all those shows. Like and subscribe. That's our show, and we're out.